What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning into the Local Crown podcast, where we're going to teach you how to wage war on your competition and earn your local crown, also known as the top spot on Google. And today I'm coming at you with my man Justin Womack, the host of the Marketing Geeks podcast. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and why you do it for the people who don't know you, my man?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, my name is Justin Womack. I am the owner of a company called JMac Media. And as my business, I help entrepreneurs and business owners, especially those in the seminar space, like coaches, experts, leaders that are running live events, which are now virtual because of the situation that's happened. But I run the back end of those businesses. I'm an automation strategist, and I work in a lot of the areas like email in the copywriting space and kind of the setup of the automatic follow-up automation processes. And then I run the Marketing Geeks podcast with my co-host Audra Sturgeon as well, and that's where we kind of take the world of marketing and try to break complex topics into conversational fun or into fun conversations. And we bring on some pretty exciting guests and pretty well-known names on that show, and it's been quite a ride. But as a business owner, my main thing is really setting up automation processes, creating copy that sells via email, and then I'm also working with people to launch products online and run joint venture type product launches. So that's kind of my bread and butter.
Beautiful, man. So not only are you helping people launch their products in the right way, which ultimately makes them a lot of money, but you're also helping them get their time back, which is more valuable than any of that money they could make to begin with.
Yeah, and in the world of copywriting, like two of the best things that you can pitch people on are saving time and making money. So anytime you can bring in the elements of saving time and making money, it's always a good thing, and that's exactly what I try to do.
100%. I actually try to get people to shift away from all the technological details of what you do. Oh, we're going to build you a chatbot. We're going to build you this automation is going to do this. Like they're not going to comprehend all of it. They just want to know how you're going to provide them value, how you're going to make them more money, and how you're going to give them more time back.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% correct. I do recommend that people learn a very little bit, like an overarching amount about like some of the technologies and things that you're using, just enough so that you are able to hire people and that you don't make bad hires, or that you're not being taken advantage of. I think there's value in knowing the brass tacks or the basics of how things work. But yes, you really don't need to know how everything works on a comprehensive on a basis. But I think it is helpful to know a little bit about these things, again, so that you're at least able to make strong hiring decisions and you know who to outsource to.
Awesome, man. So before we get too far into that, I do want to go back a little bit. Who were you before you started your company, before you started the podcast? Like, how did Justin become Justin?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I try to break that down from time to time myself. How did I become this? How did I get into this role? I'll tell you that I went to UC Santa Barbara when I went to college, and I went with zero direction on where I was going to take my life. And I eventually I started kind of pursuing an engineering track for college, and I decided I didn't want to put in it was just like a little bit too much for me. So because I had taken so many math and science classes and I had an interest in psychology, I ended up kind of combining the two and majoring in biopsychology, which is a version of neuroscience. And so I graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in biopsychology. But again, I had no like strong direction. The reason I think I took that was because I had, again, started going for engineering, and I thought that biopsychology sounded smart. And I'm like, well, people are going to hire me because this is a Bachelor of Science degree. It's not like a Bachelor of Arts like everybody else has. I felt like it made me different and it made me sound smart. And the reality was that, having a Bachelor of Science versus a Bachelor of Arts really meant nothing. It was just a qualification piece to get your foot in the door for some companies that require it or they won't have a conversation with you. It's just really just the opening that track to a conversation. So my first real job out of college was actually, I ended up working in the insurance market, which has nothing to do with anything that I studied, but it was a company that I had done some work for while I was still an undergrad. and they had put me into like a lower position. But when I graduated, they offered me a what I thought at the time around $40,000 a year salary, which I thought at the time was like amazing and like life changing money. And so I jumped on it and kind of for about 7 years worked a 40-hour a week, what I would call a soul numbing job in the insurance industry, where I was absolutely miserable, hated my life, lived my life for weekends, counted down the clock every day, didn't, really had no, and had no ambition beyond that, or, I guess I lost my ambitions beyond that, and eventually kind of just felt like I was trapped in this like hamster wheel, and like it felt like, is this really all there is to life right now? Because of I go to work at 8 a.m., go home at 5 p.m., and then do the whole thing over again. So I got into that mindset of feeling so stuck and kind of helpless even and for a while, which was tough to break out of. But did you? I mean, do you relate to that yourself, or?
100%. It's easy to get into a situation where things are not bad, but you want more, but it's hard to leave and move on.
Yeah, it was very, yeah, and that's the thing is once you get into like an ingrained pattern, it's tough to disrupt things and then change and then kind of change the path. Um, so my story's kind of weird because I actually didn't really have like a clear catalyst. But one day I just kind of had enough of my work in the insurance industry, and at the time I was working as a sales agent. I had started making decent commissions, so I think at the time I was making like $70,000 or $80,000 a year, doing insurance sales in the property and casualty division. And I was just so sick of it and so tired of going to work and playing this game that one day I just decided that I was going to put in my resignation, and I didn't have a plan, but I knew that I had a buffer of about 2 months to figure it out. And so I did it without a plan and not knowing what I was going to do. And while it felt liberating, it was a very stressful time. And so I did. I walked away. I walked away from the insurance company. I just reached that point of, I guess, like desperation, where I just had to figure something else out. And so the first thing I did was I knew that I looked at like my passions and some of the things that I'm most interested in. I've been like a movie buff since I was, in 10 years old or earlier. And so I'm like, oh, I love movies. Why don't I look at like working in the movie industry? And I live in California, kind of near Hollywood. So why don't I look at this? So I got on Craigslist and I found an opportunity to work as a production assistant for a movie, and I jumped on it, and I started working on a film. This movie never actually got a wide release, but it had Eric Roberts. The stars of the movie were Eric Roberts and Corey Feldman, which will tell you everything you need to know about the movie right there. uh, but it was, I quickly found out that working as a production assistant on a movie was actually more miserable than working in an office, because the rumors you hear about some of these Hollywood directors are true. Some of them they're intense, and they are borderline psychopaths, I would say, even on the way that they treat other people. At least in my experience with the ones that I have come in contact with. And so I quickly realized that this industry also, on the outside looked great, but on the inside was not providing any kind of value or anything that I was seeking out. And as I continued kind of on this journey, I actually stumbled upon an ad for a meetup group, which was teaching NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, and it was local to my area. So I ended up going to a small meetup group, which at that group sold me into a bigger seminar for $100. And so I ended up going to this 3-day kind of NLP seminar. And at that seminar, it was my first seminar I'd ever been to. So I bought like everything that everyone offered at the stage there, because I'd never been to the seminar. I had no idea how it even worked. It was like all new to me. And because I had bought everything, I got to have lunch with some of the guest speakers, and and one of the guest speakers was Ted McGrath. And like over the course of the next month or two, I ended up going to his event, and there came an opportunity where he needed somebody to work on the back end of his business. Kind of strangely, my wife was also interested in that, and she ended up being the person that he brought in to work for him. But she went over there for about 2 weeks, realized that she didn't like it, and then I had the chance to kind of replace her and work on the back end of that business, which I jumped at because I needed source of income, and I like this is something that's really interesting. And so that's how I first actually got into this whole seminar industry. Was I worked on the back end of his business, and I spent several months working with him and Alex Moscow, who are both pretty big names now on their individually, and together, I learned the back end of like a software like Infusionsoft. I learned about email copywriting. I started sending broadcast emails. I started learning how the sales process worked. I had to work on the back end of a seminar, how the seminars are structured, how different segments run, how the pitch, how the big pitch at the end works, and all the stuff that goes into these seminar events, which are now becoming more popular on the virtual market. I learned all this working on the back of somebody else's business because I put myself out there, and because I took advantage of the real reason this happened is because I took advantage of somebody's seminar offer to have lunch with the speakers, which started a domino effect that ultimately led to my wife and then me working for that individual on the back of the company, and so that was the first kind of step into this market. And I'll keep going. Did you have anything regarding this at all?
I'm just loving the story, man. I'm loving
All
hearing
right,
about the
cool.
ride.
Cool, right on. So I worked on the back end of this business for quite a while, and this is where I built the foundational skills, I would say, that kind of have made up my business now. But while I was on this journey working on the back end of this business, I actually got into a really, really major car accident, and not like your average run of the mill car accident, but I actually lost control of my car, went over a off the side of a bridge, or like a small bridge, and rolled upside down and landed into a body of water. And so I got knocked unconscious and was upside down in a body of water, and was actually, somebody witnessed it happened, jumped out of their car, and there were a few other people that witnessed it that were nearby, that were able to pull me out of the car. And I guess I was underwater for about 3 minutes or so. They were able to rescue me, bring me out of the car, drag me to the side, and do and then there was also a off-duty, I want to say off-duty fireman, I think it was, that was also there, that ended up doing CPR on me and kind of kept me alive while an ambulance arrived. And this started a whole shift in my entire life where, because of the water that I had landed in, it was actually like really dirty water. What's called aspirated. I breathed a lot of this water into my lungs, and my lungs got really, really sick because of the type of water. So because of that, I developed something called ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is also what a lot of people that get coronavirus or COVID, if they have symptoms and they're really, really bad, a lot of times the symptoms will develop into ARDS, and so just like those kind of patients, I was put on a respirator. I was put into a medical coma for 30 days, and then put on a ventilator. And so so after my car accident, I woke up 30 days later in a hospital bed with a vent and I think it was 6 chest tubes pumping into my body, and unable to speak, because when you have a vent you can't speak. Unable to kind of move my body just because I'd been in a bed for the atrophy from being still for in a medical coma for 30 days. And I for the next month, so for 2 months I was in the ICU, but for the next month I remained in there as they continued to work on my lungs, which had been severely compromised from this dirty water. And so I was put on experimental dosages of antifungal medications. I was they had to be retrained on how to use my lungs to breathe again after being on a respirator and a vent. And so I spent 30 days awake in a hospital bed, unable to move. I'm unable to leave the bed and unable to talk, because of the vent. So that was, as you can imagine, those were some of the longest days of my life. At least they felt like it, because there was, again, I could not talk and I could not move. And it was it was a time of kind of like reflection on, wow, like I really shouldn't have even survived this, but I'm still here, I'm still alive. And ultimately, when I finally did get out of the hospital, it took me about a year to kind of rebuild my body from the atrophy, because being in a hospital bed, not using any muscles. When I got out of my bed for the first time, I could barely walk. I couldn't like keep my back straight. I couldn't lift my arms over my head. I couldn't open a sliding glass door because it was too heavy. It was intense. I had lost about 50 pounds, just being in the hospital bed, and only being fed through a feeding tube and being fed through an IV. And so it was a pretty significant process of rebuilding my body. But during that time, I moved home with my parents while I went through this whole rehabilitation process, and I just started continuing the path as far as the stuff that I was learning, like the business coaching, the personal development coaching, the seminar space. I just started taking all kinds of courses on online marketing, product launch formula, all these different things that I had already kind of had a small foundation on, but I spent all that extra time where I was unable to really work or do anything, just consuming content and consuming courses. And so I made the decision that because I pretty much shouldn't even have survived that this kind of gave me the permission I needed to go, okay, if life's this short and it should have already been over, I'm going to go ahead and just do what I want to do. And that's what led me when I finally did move back down south and move back in with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. It gave me the permission I needed to take the risk to start my own business, and it started, and that was what kind of got me started with my own company. And while the first year was not what I would say a success story, I think I made like $25,000 my first year. Luckily, most of that was profit, but it was, but still, $25,000 is not gonna really, not a successful business. I was able to make, at least I was able to make that to keep. I always made enough to keep my basic expenses at hand, and I had some support from my wife in that first year, to kind of get through the toughest part of being an entrepreneur. And I think some of that is kind of getting your first dollar, getting your first client is one of the biggest challenges. And I think most of that's mental, but for me, it was one of the hardest parts. And then I've just continued to just grind and study and move. And over the course, now it's been 5 years. It's incredible to look back and think about like where I was even then versus where I am now, because even though when I started my business, I felt like I was an expert. If I look back to where I was when I started, it's like I'm on an entirely different level, just because this is what I do with my time. This is how I live my life. Is I am a practitioner in the field of marketing and running other people's, especially running other people's back ends of their businesses. And it's just interesting to realize that I think this is a common thing in the marketing industry, is that a lot of people think they're more qualified than they are. And that's not to say that that's not everyone, but there's a lot of people that have, take one marketing course and they think they're ready to take on the world. And I think I might have also been in that same boat in the beginning. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like you might be, if you're not willing to really, really, really work hard and put in multiple years, you really, that's what's going to take to really get to the level that is, that's going to be able to see, I think, a 6, 7, or 8-figure business develop out of it. Because unless you just like land like one giant client when you have a limited expertise and you kind of you're just a great salesperson, I don't think you're going to be able to build a lasting business until those foundations come into place. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't take on smaller clients and kind of work your way up the way that I did, but that's just kind of been my experience, though, that like for me to actually reach a state where I actually feel now highly, highly competent. I don't like the word expert for anything, but someone that's rooted into this material, it took a long time. And even with something like sometimes I run Facebook traffic and Facebook ads, and for me to have a successful Facebook campaign, it took me actually it took me a lot of campaigns before I started seeing actual returns on investment and something like that. And like everyone makes it sound like it's so easy, but I struggled for years. I'm like, what is going on with this? But year after year after year, I'm not even sure exactly what shifted, but something obviously shifted because after I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it, I just continually, slowly get better. And while I was considered a really, really good student in school, I now think of myself as actually a very slow learner on things at a deep level. So like, even though I can learn like the conceptual nature of something very, very fast, for me to really get to understand exactly like how things work, often takes me like it could take 2 or 3 years of me like working, like fully immersing myself into a certain area, and I'm realizing more and more that there's a lot to be said about immersion and about really putting yourself into the field that you want to dedicate your time to or your life to.
Awesome, man. So that's first of all, your story is just incredible. And so I do have to ask though, like through all of that, you had to have developed a very, very resilient mindset. Like what were some of the shifts you went through and even maybe things that you started implementing day to day just to keep your mindset strong when you were having to overcome just all of those obstacles?
Yeah, I mean I think the biggest mindset shift that I still work on this, but it's something that I've definitely continued to enhance over time. And I started this even before the car accident, but I really put it into focus after. Is that I need to focus on only the things that I can control and the things that I cannot, and not focus on the things that I cannot control. And so like that's one of the big areas that I think distracted me and hurt me early or in my business in my professional career, is that I would look at external circumstances and blame things for why my life was a certain way, and not take personal responsibility, and not look at, okay, well, my life is this way. That's just how it is. What do I have to do to get myself to the next level to where I can change things? And so like to me,
Mm,
that's like the mental approach that needs to happen. Like I think it's easy to blame external circumstances. That's not to say that they don't play a role, but they don't play a role in your ability to improve yourself. I mean, so if if I blame something that happened to me as a kid or something that happened to me or my car accident, even, like, that's true, my car accident really messed with my life, but it doesn't mean that someone else is going to care about that, and it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to leverage that to now improve my financial situation. So from the standpoint of looking at like how am I going to actually make myself better and put myself in a position to succeed, I have to spend my time focusing on what I can control, and those things are what kind of content I'm
mm.
consuming, what kind of media. Am I wasting my time watching too much TV news, or am I wasting my time watching too much Marvel movies, or am I wasting my time watching or reading too much? For a while, I used to read up on like these movie websites about movies that will come out a year from now, which is fine. But I mean, like if I'm wasting too much time on those elements, that's a distraction. So it's like I have to really look at my priorities and how I'm spending the time that I have. That was one of the big shifts. And the other thing that I took on after, again, this is something I explored before, because even when I was working for insurance companies and working as a sales agent, I had taken things like Toastmasters, which is what I'll call like it's almost like a recovery program, but teaching you, instead of teaching you to recover from drugs or alcohol, it's teaching you how to become a public speaker. It's funny, they have like support meetings, is like what they're the way that they're structured, but it's a group that will help you become a better public speaker. So Toastmasters is a organization that you'll likely would normally find in your local community. There's tons of chapters across the country. I don't know how it's working with coronavirus, but I started kind of that route. That was my first exposure to public speaking. But after once I had my car accident, I invested a ton of my time in the field of public speaking, because I realized that working on the back end of other people's businesses and understanding that how these kind of seminar companies or virtual event companies now operate and how they make their money is they make their money through live events or virtual live events, and it's through the ability to be able to pitch from the stage or pitch from the virtual stage and be able to sell products. And so I took when I mentioned that I went to an NLP seminar back, that kind of led me down my path. The same person that did that instruction, I actually reached back out to him after the car accident and went through his NLP speaker training program, which was a really, really cool experience. It was 5 days of immersive public speaking where you actually practiced with, you got into little groups of 6 people and actually practiced all kinds of different behaviors, including the way that your body language displays while you're public speaking, to vocal tonalities, to just tons of different elements that most people wouldn't think about when you're doing public speaking. But I put a lot of time into that, and then I immediately started volunteering for organizations in my local community to give business talks. Like I started giving talks for the local library where I live. I started giving talks for the local chapters of SCORE, which is SCORE is a government organization that actually provides free business counsel and business consulting, and so I highly recommend people check this out. It's score.org. And your tax dollars go towards it, so it's absolutely free. Great resource. And I started giving talks for them. I started giving talks, and then I found another organization locally that was for women entrepreneurs, but they needed people, and I started giving talks for them as well. So I would speak to local women entrepreneurs and teach them things about business and marketing that I had learned. And so by kind of putting myself out there and just pushing myself to take on public speaking gigs and to become a better speaker, I think that's probably the most important action that I took in making that jump into entrepreneurship, because I really do believe that your ability to public speak is absolutely critical to success, especially in the industry that I'm in, which is this personal development and business coaching field.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you learned something. If you have questions, email us at info@thelocalcrown.com. And if you want to get featured in our publication, Inside the Empire, alongside John Lee Dumas, the entrepreneur on fire, Jayson Waller, the CEO of Power Home Solar, Sharon Lechter, Dan Caldwell, the man that started Tap Out, and the limitless man himself, Jim Kwik, for free, then head over to thelocalcrown.com/become a contributor.